"Are you kidding?" she replied. "That's not my dog. I've told you already. He belongs to my girls." "Where are your girls?" I asked. "They are in the mountains," she replied. She came out of her room and faced me. "Do you want to see what that goddamn dog did to me?" she asked in a dry tone. "Look!" She unwrapped her shawl and showed me her naked back. I found no visible tooth marks on her back. There were only a few long, superficial scratches she might have gotten by rubbing against the hard ground. For all that matter, she could have scratched herself when she attacked me. "You have nothing there," I said. "Come and look in the light," she said, and went over by the door. She insisted that I look carefully for the gashes of the dog's teeth. I felt stupid. I had a heavy sensation around my eyes, especially on my brow. I went outside instead. The dog had not moved and began to bark as soon as I came out the door. I cursed myself. There was no one to blame but me. I had walked into that trap like a fool. I resolved right then to walk to town. But my wallet, my papers, everything I had was in my briefcase on the floor of the car, right under the dog's feet. I had an attack of despair. It was useless to walk to town. I did not have enough money in my pockets even to buy a cup of coffee. Besides, I did not know a soul in town. I had no other alternative but to get the dog out of the car. "What kind of food does that dog eat?" I yelled from the door. "Why don't you try your leg?" Dona Soledad yelled back from her room and cackled. I looked for some cooked food in the house. The pots were empty. There was nothing else for me to do but to confront her again. My despair had turned into rage. I stormed into her room ready for a fight to the death. She was lying on her bed, covered with her shawl. "Please forgive me for having done all those things to you," she said bluntly, looking at the ceiling. Her boldness stopped my rage. "You must understand my position," she went on. "I couldn't let you go." She laughed softly, and in a clear, calm, and very pleasing voice, said that she was guilty of being greedy and clumsy, that she had nearly succeeded in scaring me away with her antics, but that the situation had suddenly changed. She paused and sat up in her bed, covering her breasts with her shawl, then added that a strange confidence had descended into her body. She looked up at the ceiling and moved her arms in a weird, rhythmical flow, like a windmill. "There is no way for you to leave now," she said. She scrutinized me without laughing. My internal rage had subsided, but my despair was more acute than ever. I honestly knew that in matters of sheer strength, I was no match for her or the dog. She said that our appointment had been set up years in advance, and that neither of us had enough power to hurry it or break it. "Don't knock yourself out trying to leave," she said. "That's as useless as my trying to keep you here. Something besides your will release you from here, and something besides my will keep you here." Somehow her confidence had not only mellowed her, but had given her a great command over words. Her statements were compelling and crystal clear. Don Juan had always said that I was a trusting soul when it came to words. As she talked, I found myself thinking that she was not really as threatening as I thought. She no longer projected the feeling of having a chip on her shoulder. My reason was almost at ease, but another part of me was not. All the muscles of my body were like tense wires, and yet I had to admit to myself that although she scared me out of my wits, I found her most appealing. She watched me. "I'll show you how useless it is to try to leave," she said, jumping out of bed. "I'm going to help you. What do you need?" She observed me with a gleam in her eyes. Her small white teeth gave her smile a devilish touch. Her chubby face was strangely smooth and fairly free of wrinkles. 2 deep lines running from the sides of her nose to the corners of her mouth gave her face the appearance of maturity, but not age. In standing up from the bed, she casually let her shawl fall straight down, uncovering her full breasts. She did not bother to cover herself. Instead, she swelled up her chest and lifted her breasts. "Oh, you've noticed, huh?" she said, and rocked her body from side to side, as if pleased with herself. "I always keep my hair tied behind my head. The Nahual told me to do so. The pull makes my face younger." I had been sure that she was going to talk about her breasts. Her shift was a surprise to me. "I don't mean that the pull on my hair is going to make me look younger," she went on with a charming smile. "The pull on my hair makes me younger." "How is that possible?" I asked. She answered me with a question. She wanted to know if I had correctly understood Don Juan when he said that anything was possible if one wants it with unbending intent. I was after a more precise explanation. I wanted to know what else she did besides tying her hair in order to look so young. She said that she lay in her bed and emptied herself of any thoughts and feelings, and then let the lines of her floor pull her wrinkles away. I pressed her for more details, any feelings, sensations, perceptions that she had experienced while lying on her bed. She insisted that she felt nothing, that she did not know how the lines in her floor worked, and that she only knew not to let her thoughts interfere. She placed her hands on my chest and shoved me very gently. It seemed to be a gesture to show that she had had enough of my questions. We walked outside, through the back door. I told her that I needed a long stick. She went directly to a pile of firewood, but there were no long sticks. I asked her if she could get me a couple of nails in order to join together 2 pieces of firewood. We looked unsuccessfully all over the house for nails. As a final resort, I had to dislodge the longest stick I could find in the chicken coop that Pablito had built in the back. The stick, although it was a bit flimsy, seemed suited for my purpose. Dona Soledad had not smiled or joked during our search. She seemed to be utterly absorbed in her task of helping me. Her concentration was so intense that I had the feeling she was wishing me to succeed. I walked to my car, armed with a long stick and a shorter one from the pile of firewood. Dona Soledad stood by the front door. I began to tease the dog with the short stick in my right hand, and at the same time I tried to release the safety lock with the long one in my other hand. The dog nearly bit my right hand and made me drop the short stick. The rage and power of the enormous beast were so immense that I nearly lost the long one too. The dog was about to bite it in two when Dona Soledad came to my aid. Pounding on the back window, she drew the dog's attention, and he let go of it. Encouraged by her distracting maneuver, I dove head first and slid across the length of the front seat and managed to release the safety lock. I tried to pull back immediately, but the dog charged toward me with all his might and actually thrust his massive shoulders and front paws over the front seat before I had time to back out. I felt his paws on my shoulder. I cringed. I knew that he was going to maul me. The dog lowered his head to go in for the kill, but instead of biting me, he hit the steering wheel. I scurried out and in one move climbed over the hood and onto the roof. I had goosebumps all over my body. I opened the right-hand door. I asked Dona Soledad to hand me the long stick, and with it, I pushed the lever to release the backrest from its straight position. I conceived that if I teased the dog, he would ram it forward, allowing himself room to get out of the car. But he did not move. He bit furiously on the stick instead. At that moment, Dona Soledad jumped onto the roof and lay next to me. She wanted to help me tease the dog. I told her that she could not stay on the roof because when the dog came out, I was going to get in the car and drive away. I thanked her for her help and said that she should go back in the house. She shrugged her shoulders, jumped down, and went back to the door. I pushed down the release again, and with my cap, I teased the dog. I snapped it around his eyes, in front of his muzzle. The dog's fury was beyond anything I had seen, but he would not leave the seat. Finally, his massive jaws jerked the stick out of my grip. I climbed down to retrieve it from underneath the car. Suddenly, I heard Dona Soledad screaming, "Watch out, he's getting out." I glanced up at the car. The dog was squeezing himself over the seat. He had gotten his hind paws caught in the steering wheel. Except for that, he was almost out. I dashed to the house and got inside just in time to avoid being run down by that animal. His momentum was so powerful that he rammed against the door. As she secured the door with its iron bar, Dona Soledad said in a crackling voice, "I told you, it was useless." She cleared her throat and turned to look at me. "Can you tie the dog with a rope?" I asked. I was sure that she would give me a meaningless answer, but to my amazement, she said that we should try everything, even luring the dog into the house and trapping him there. Her idea appealed to me. I carefully opened the front door. The dog was no longer there. I ventured out a bit more. There was no sight of him. My hope was that the dog had gone back to his corral. I was going to wait another instant before I made a dash for my car, when I heard a deep growl and saw the massive head of the beast inside my car. He had crawled back onto the front seat. Dona Soledad was right. It was useless to try. A wave of sadness enveloped me. Somehow I knew my end was near. In a fit of sheer desperation, I told Dona Soledad that I was going to get a knife from the kitchen and kill the dog, or be killed by him. And I would have done that had it not been that there was not a single metal object in the entire house. "Didn't the Nahual teach you to accept your fate?" Dona Soledad asked as she trailed behind me. "That one out there is no ordinary dog. That dog has power. He is a warrior. He will do what he has to do, even kill you." I had a moment of uncontrollable frustration and grabbed her by the shoulders and growled. She did not seem surprised or affected by my sudden outburst. She turned her back to me and dropped her shawl to the floor. Her back was very strong and beautiful. I had an irrepressible urge to hit her, but I ran my hand across her shoulders instead. Her skin was soft and smooth. Her arms and shoulders were muscular without being big. She seemed to have a minimal layer of fat that rounded off her muscles and gave her upper body the appearance of smoothness. And yet, when I pushed on any part of it with the tips of my fingers, I could feel the hardness of unseen muscles below the smooth surface. I did not want to look at her breasts. She walked to a roofed open area in back of the house that served as a kitchen. I followed her. She sat down on a bench and calmly washed her feet in a pail. While she was putting on her sandals, I went with great trepidation into a new outhouse that had been built in the back. She was standing by the door when I came out. "You like to talk," she said casually, leading me into her room. "There is no hurry. Now we can talk forever." She picked up my writing pad from the top of her chest of drawers, where she must have placed it herself, and handed it to me with exaggerated care. Then she pulled up her bedspread and folded it neatly and put it on top of the same chest of drawers. I noticed then that the two chests were the color of the walls, yellowish white, and the bed without the spread was pinkish red, more or less the color of the floor. The bedspread, on the other hand, was dark brown, like the wood of the ceiling and the wood panels of the windows. "Let's talk," she said, sitting comfortably on the bed after taking off her sandals. She placed her knees against her naked breasts. She looked like a young girl. Her aggressive and commandeering manner had subdued and changed into charm. At that moment, she was the antithesis of what she had been earlier. I had to laugh at the way she was urging me to write. She reminded me of Don Juan. "Now we have time," she said. "The wind has changed. Didn't you notice it?" I had. She said that the new direction of the wind was her own beneficial direction, and thus the wind had turned into her helper. "What do you know about the wind, Dona Soledad?" I asked as I calmly sat down on the front of her bed. "Only what the Nahual taught me," she said. "Each one of us, women that is, has a peculiar direction, a particular wind. Men don't. I am the north wind. When it blows, I am different. The Nahual said that a warrior can use her particular wind for whatever she wants. I used it to trim my body and remake it. Look at me. I am the north wind. Feel me when I come through the window." There was a strong wind blowing through the window, which was strategically placed to face the north. "Why do you think men don't have a wind?" I asked. She thought for a moment and then replied that the Nahual had never mentioned why. You wanted to know who made this floor, she said, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. I made it myself. It took me 4 years to put it down. Now this floor is like myself. As she spoke, I noticed that the converging lines in the floor were oriented to originate from the north. The room, however, was not perfectly aligned with the cardinal points. Thus, her bed was at odd angles with the walls, and so were the lines in the clay slabs. Why did you make the floor red, Dona Soledad? That's my color. I am red, like red dirt. I got the red clay in the mountains around here. The Nahual told me where to look, and he also helped me carry it, and so did everyone else. They all helped me. How did you fire the clay? The Nahual made me dig a pit. We filled it with firewood and then stacked up the clay slabs with flat pieces of rock in between them. I closed the pit with a lid of dirt and wire and set the wood on fire. It burned for days. How did you keep the slabs from warping? I didn't. The wind did that. The north wind that blew while the fire was on. The Nahual showed me how to dig the pit so it would face the north and the north wind. He also made me leave 4 holes for the north wind to blow into the pit. Then he made me leave 1 hole in the center of the lid to let the smoke out. The wind made the wood burn for days. After the pit was cold again, I opened it and began to polish and even out the slabs. It took me over a year to make enough slabs to finish my floor. How did you figure out the design? The wind taught me that. When I made my floor, the Nahual had already taught me not to resist the wind. He had showed me how to give in to my wind and let it guide me. It took him a long time to do that, years and years. I was a very difficult, silly old woman at first. He told me that himself, and he was right. But I learned very fast. Perhaps because I'm old and no longer have anything to lose. In the beginning, what made it even more difficult for me was the fear I had. The mere presence of the Nahual made me stutter and faint. The Nahual had that same effect on everyone else. It was his fate to be so fearsome. She stopped talking and stared at me. The Nahual is not human, she said. What makes you say that? The Nahual is a devil from who knows what time. Her statements chilled me. I felt my heart pounding. She certainly could not have found a better audience. I was intrigued to no end. I begged her to explain what she meant by that. His touch changed people, she said. You know that. He changed your body. In your case, you didn't even know that he was doing that. But he got into your old body. He put something in it. He did the same with me. He left something in me, and that something took over. Only a devil can do that. Now I am the north wind, and I fear nothing and no one. But before he changed me, I was a weak, ugly old woman who would faint at the mere mention of his name. Pablito, of course, was no help to me because he feared the Nahual more than death itself. One day the Nahual and Gennaro came to the house when I was alone. I heard them by the door, like prowling jaguars. I crossed myself. To me, they were two demons, but I came out to see what I could do for them. They were hungry, and I gladly fixed food for them. I had some thick bowls made out of a gourd, and I gave each man a bowl of soup. The Nahual didn't seem to appreciate the food. He didn't want to eat food prepared by such a weak woman, and pretended to be clumsy, and knocked the bowl off the table with a sweep of his arm. But the bowl, instead of turning over and spilling all over the floor, slid with the force of the Nahual's blow and fell on my foot without spilling a drop. The bowl actually landed on my foot and stayed there until I bent over and picked it up. I set it up on the table in front of him and told him that even though I was a weak woman, I had always feared him, my food had good feelings. From that very moment, the Nahual changed toward me. The fact that the bowl of soup fell on my foot and didn't spill proved to him that power had pointed me out to him. I didn't know that at the time, and I thought that he changed toward me because he felt ashamed of having refused my food. I thought nothing of his change. I still was petrified and couldn't even look him in the eye. But he began to take more and more notice of me. He even brought me gifts, a shawl, a dress, a comb, and other things. That made me feel terrible. I was ashamed because I thought that he was a man looking for a woman. The Nahual had young girls. What would he want with an old woman like me? At first, I didn't want to wear or even consider looking at his gifts. But Pablito prevailed on me, and I began to wear them. I also began to be even more afraid of him and didn't want to be alone with him. I knew that he was a devilish man. I knew what he had done to his women. I felt compelled to interrupt her. I told her that I had never known of a woman in Don Juan's life. "You know who I mean," she said. "Believe me, Dona Soledad, I don't." "Don't give me that. You know I'm talking about La Gorda." The only La Gorda I knew of was Pablito's sister, an enormously fat girl nicknamed Gorda, Fatso. I had had the feeling, although no one ever talked about it, that she was not really Dona Soledad's daughter. I did not want to press her for any more information. I suddenly remembered that the fat girl had disappeared from the house, and nobody could or dared to tell me what had happened to her. One day I was alone in the front of the house, Dona Soledad went on. I was combing my hair in the sun with a comb that the Nahual had given me. I didn't realize that he had arrived and was standing behind me. All of a sudden I felt his hands grabbing me by the chin. I heard him say very softly that I shouldn't move because my neck might break. He twisted my head to the left. Not all the way, but a bit. I became very frightened and screamed and tried to wriggle out of his grip. But he held my head firmly for a long, long time. When he let go of my chin, I fainted. I don't remember what happened then. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground, right here where I'm sitting now. The Nahual was gone. I was so ashamed that I didn't want to see anyone, especially La Gorda. For a long time, I even thought that the Nahual had never twisted my neck, and I had had a nightmare. She stopped. I waited for an explanation of what had happened. She seemed distracted, pensive perhaps. What exactly happened, Dona Soledad? I asked, incapable of containing myself. Did he do something to you? Yes. He twisted my neck in order to change the direction of my eyes, she said, and laughed loudly at my look of surprise. I mean, did he? Yes, he changed my direction, she went on, oblivious to my probes. He did that to you and to all the others. That's true. He did that to me. But why do you think he did that? He had to. That is the most important thing to do. She was referring to a peculiar act that Don Juan had deemed absolutely necessary. I had never talked about it with anyone. In fact, I had almost forgotten about it. At the beginning of my apprenticeship, he once built 2 small fires in the mountains of northern Mexico. They were perhaps 20 feet apart. He made me stand another 20 feet away from them, holding my body, especially my head, in a most relaxed and natural position. He then made me face one fire, and coming from behind me, he twisted my neck to the left and aligned my eyes, but not my shoulders, with the other fire. He held my head in that position for hours until the fire was extinguished. The new direction was the southeast, or rather, he had aligned the second fire in the southeasterly direction. I had understood the whole affair as one of Don Juan's inscrutable peculiarities, one of his nonsensical rites. The Nahual said that all of us throughout our lives develop one direction to look, she went on. That becomes the direction of the eyes of the spirit. Through the years, that direction becomes overused and weak and unpleasant. And since we are bound to that particular direction, we become weak and unpleasant ourselves. The day the Nahual twisted my neck and held it until I fainted out of fear, he gave me a new direction. What direction did he give you? Why do you ask that? She said with unnecessary force. Do you think that perhaps the Nahual gave me a different direction? I can tell you the direction that he gave me, I said. Never mind, she snapped. He told me that himself. She seemed agitated. She changed position and lay on her stomach. My back hurt from writing. I asked her if I could sit on her floor and use the bed as a table. She stood up and handed me the folded bedspread to use as a cushion. What else did the Nahual do to you? I asked. After changing my direction, the Nahual really began to talk to me about power, she said, lying down again. He mentioned things in a casual way at first, because he didn't know exactly what to do with me. One day, he took me for a short walking trip in the Sierras. Then another day, he took me on a bus to his homeland in the desert. Little by little, I became accustomed to going away with him. Did he ever give you power plants? He gave me mescalito once when we were in the desert. But since I was an empty woman, Mescalito refused me. I had a horrid encounter with him. It was then that the Nahual knew that he ought to acquaint me with the wind instead. That was, of course, after he got an omen. He had said over and over that day that although he was a sorcerer that had learned to see, if he didn't get an omen, he had no way of knowing which way to go. He had already waited for days for a certain indication about me, but power didn't want to give it. In desperation, I suppose, he introduced me to his guaje, and I saw Mescalito. I interrupted her. Her use of the word guaje, gourd, was confusing to me. Examined in the context of what she was telling me, the word had no meaning. I thought that perhaps she was speaking metaphorically, or that gourd was a euphemism. What is a guaje, Dona Soledad? There was a look of surprise in her eyes. She paused before answering. Mescalito is the Nahual's guaje, she finally said. Her answer was even more confusing. I felt mortified by the fact that she really seemed concerned with making sense to me. When I asked her to explain further, she insisted that I knew everything myself. That was Don Juan's favorite stratagem to foil my probes. I said to her that Don Juan had told me that Mescalito was a deity, a force contained in the peyote buttons. To say that Mescalito was his gourd made absolutely no sense. The Nahual can acquaint you with anything through his gourd, she said after a pause. That is the key to his power. Anyone can give you peyote, but only a sorcerer through his gourd can acquaint you with Mescalito. She stopped talking and fixed her eyes on me. Her look was ferocious. Why do you have to make me repeat what you already know? She asked in an angry tone. I was completely taken aback by her sudden shift. A moment before, she had been almost sweet. Never mind my changes of mood, she said, smiling again. I am the north wind. I'm very impatient. All my life I never dared to speak my mind. Now I fear no one. I say what I feel. To meet with me, you have to be strong. She slid closer to me on her stomach. Well, the Nahual acquainted me with the Mescalito that came out of his gourd, she went on. But he couldn't guess what would happen to me. He expected something like your own meeting or Eligio's meeting with Mescalito. In both cases, he was at a loss and let his gourd decide what to do next. In both cases, his gourd helped him. With me, it was different. Mescalito told him never to bring me around. The Nahual and I left that place in great hurry. We went north instead of coming home. We took a bus to go to Mexicali, but we got out in the middle of the desert. It was very late. The sun was setting behind the mountains. The Nahual wanted to cross the road and go south on foot. We were waiting for some speeding cars to go by, when suddenly he tapped my shoulder and pointed toward the road ahead of us. I saw a spiral of dust. A gust of wind was raising dust on the side of the road. We watched it move toward us. The Nahual ran across the road, and the wind enveloped me. It actually made me spin very gently, and then it vanished. That was the omen the Nahual was waiting for. From then on, we went to the mountains or the desert for the purpose of seeking the wind. The wind didn't like me at first because I was my old self, so the Nawal endeavored to change me. He first made me build this room and this floor. Then he made me wear new clothes and sleep on a mattress instead of a straw mat. He made me wear shoes and have drawers full of clothes. He forced me to walk hundreds of miles and taught me to be quiet. I learned very fast. He also made me do strange things for no reason at all. One day, while we were in the mountains of his homeland, I listened to the wind for the first time. It came directly to my womb. I was lying on top of a flat rock, and the wind twirled around me. I had already seen it that day whirling around the bushes, but this time it came over me and stopped. It felt like a bird that had landed on my stomach. The Nawal had made me take off all my clothes. I was stark naked, but I was not cold because the wind was warming me up. Were you afraid, Dona Soledad? Afraid? I was petrified. The wind was alive. It licked me from my head to my toes, and then it got inside my whole body. I was like a balloon, and the wind came out of my ears and my mouth and other parts I don't want to mention. I thought I was going to die, and I would have run away had it not been that the Nawal held me to the rock. He spoke to me in my ear and calmed me down. I lay quietly and let the wind do whatever it wanted with me. It was then that it told me what to do. What to do with what? With my life, my things, my room, my feelings. It was not clear at first. I thought it was me thinking. The Nawal said that all of us do that. When we are quiet, though, we realize that it is something else telling us things. Did you hear a voice? No, the wind moves inside the body of a woman. The Nawal says that is so because women have wombs. Once inside the womb, the wind simply picks you up and tells you to do things. The more quiet and relaxed the woman is, the better the results. You may say that all of a sudden the woman finds herself doing things that she had no idea how to do. From that day on, the wind came to me all the time. It spoke to me in my womb and told me everything I wanted to know. The Nawal saw from the beginning that I was the north wind. Other winds never spoke to me like that, although I had learned to distinguish them. How many kinds of winds are there? There are 4 winds, like there are 4 directions. That's, of course, for sorcerers and for whatever sorcerers do. 4 is a power number for them. The first wind is the breeze, the morning. It brings hope and brightness. It is the herald of the day. It comes and goes and gets into everything. Sometimes it is mild and unnoticeable. Other times it is nagging and bothersome. Another wind is the hard wind, either hot or cold or both. A midday wind, blasting, full of energy, but also full of blindness. It breaks through doors and brings down walls. A sorcerer must be terribly strong to tackle the hard wind. Then there is the cold wind of the afternoon, sad and trying. A wind that would never leave you in peace. It will chill you and make you cry. The Nawal said that there is such depth to it, though, that it is more than worthwhile to seek it. And at last, there is the hot wind. It warms and protects and envelops everything. It is a night wind for sorcerers. Its power goes together with the darkness. Those are the four winds. They are also associated with the four directions. The breeze is the east. The cold wind is the west. The hot one is the south. The hard wind is the north. The four winds also have personalities. The breeze is gay and sleek and shifty. The cold wind is moody and melancholy and always pensive. The hot wind is happy and abandoned and bouncy. The hard wind is energetic and commandeering and impatient. The Nawal told me that the four winds are women. That is why female warriors seek them. Winds and women are alike. That is also the reason why women are better than men. I would say that women learn faster if they cling to their specific wind. How can a woman know what her specific wind is? If the woman quiets down and is not talking to herself, her wind will pick her up, just like that. She made a gesture of grabbing. Does she have to lie naked? That helps, especially if she is shy. I was a fat old woman. I have never taken off my clothes in my life. I slept in them, and when I took a bath, I always had my slip on. For me to show my fat body to the wind was like dying. The Nawal knew that and played it for all it was worth. He knew of the friendship of women and the wind, but he introduced me to Mezcalito because he was baffled by me. After turning my head that first terrible day, the Nawal found himself with me on his hands. He told me that he had no idea what to do with me. But one thing was for sure. He didn't want a fat old woman snooping around his world. The Nawal said that he felt about me the way he felt about you, baffled. Both of us shouldn't be here. You're not an Indian, and I'm an old cow. We are both useless if you come right down to it. And look at us. Something must have happened. A woman, of course, is much more supple than a man. A woman changes very easily with the power of a sorcerer, especially with the power of a sorcerer like the Nawal. A male apprentice, according to the Nawal, is extremely difficult. For example, you yourself haven't changed as much as La Gorda, and she started her apprenticeship way after you did. A woman is softer and more gentle, and above all, a woman is like a gourd. She receives. But somehow, a man commands more power. The Nawal never agreed with that, though. He believed that women are unequaled, tops. He also believed that I felt men were better only because I am an empty woman. He must be right. I have been empty for so long that I can't remember what it feels like to be complete. The Nahual said that if I ever become complete, I will change my feelings about it. But if he was right, his Gorda would have done as well as Eligio. As you know, she hasn't. I could not follow the flow of her narrative because of her unstated assumption that I knew what she was referring to. In this case, I had no idea what Eligio or La Gorda had done. In what way was La Gorda different from Eligio? I asked. She looked at me for a moment, as if measuring something in me. Then she sat up with her knees against her chest. The Nahual told me everything, she said briskly. The Nahual had no secrets from me. Eligio was the best. That's why he is not in the world now. He didn't return. In fact, he was so good that he didn't have to jump from a precipice when his apprenticeship was over. He was like Gennaro. One day, while he was working in the field, something came to him and took him away. He knew how to let go. I felt like asking her if I had really jumped into the abyss. I deliberated for a moment before going ahead with my question. After all, I had come to see Pablito and Nestor to clarify that point. Any information I could get on the topic from anyone involved in Don Juan's world was indeed a bonus to me. She laughed at my question, as I had anticipated. You mean you don't know what you yourself did? She asked. It's too far-fetched to be real, I said. That is the Nahual's world, for sure. Not a thing in it is real. He himself told me not to believe anything. But still, the male apprentices have to jump, unless they are truly magnificent, like Eligio. The Nahual took us, me and La Gorda, to that mountain and made us look down to the bottom of it. There, he showed us the kind of flying Nahual he was. But only La Gorda could follow him. She also wanted to jump into the abyss. The Nahual told her that that was useless. He said female warriors have to do things more painful and more difficult than that. He also told us that the jump was only for the four of you. And that is what happened. The four of you jumped. She had said that the four of us had jumped, but I only knew of Pablito and myself having done that. In light of her statements, I figured that Don Juan and Don Gennaro must have followed us. That did not seem odd to me. It was rather pleasing and touching. What are you talking about? She asked, after I had voiced my thoughts. I meant you and the three apprentices of Gennaro. You, Pablito, and Nestor jumped on the same day. Who is the other apprentice of Don Gennaro? I know only Pablito and Nestor. You mean that you didn't know that Benigno was Gennaro's apprentice? No, I didn't. He was Gennaro's oldest apprentice. He jumped before you did, and he jumped by himself. Benigno was one of 5 Indian youths I had once found while roaming in the Sonoran Desert with Don Juan. They were in search of power objects. Don Juan told me that all of them were apprentices of sorcery. I struck up a peculiar friendship with Benigno in the few times I had seen him after that day. He was from southern Mexico. I liked him very much. For some unknown reason, he seemed to delight himself by creating a tantalizing mystery about his personal life. I could never find out who he was or what he did. Every time I talked to him, he baffled me with the disarming candor with which he evaded my probes. Once Don Juan volunteered some information about Benigno and said that he was very fortunate in having found a teacher and a benefactor. I took Don Juan's statements as a casual remark that meant nothing. Dona Soledad had clarified a 10-year-old mystery for me. Why do you think Don Juan never told me anything about Benigno? Who knows? He must have had a reason. The Nahual never did anything thoughtlessly. I had to prop my aching back against her bed before resuming writing. Whatever happened to Benigno? He's doing fine. He's perhaps better off than anyone else. You'll see him. He's with Pablito and Nestor. Right now, they're inseparable. Gennaro's brand is on them. The same thing happened to the girls. They're inseparable because the Nahual's brand is on them. I had to interrupt her again and ask her to explain what girls she was talking about. My girls, she said. Your daughters? I mean Pablito's sisters? They are not Pablito's sisters. They are the Nahual's apprentices. Her disclosure shocked me. Ever since I had met Pablito years before, I had been led to believe that the 4 girls who lived in his house were his sisters. Don Juan himself had told me so. I had a sudden relapse of the feeling of despair I had experienced all afternoon. Dona Soledad was not to be trusted. She was engineering something. I was sure that Don Juan could not under any conditions have misled me so grossly. Dona Soledad examined me with overt curiosity. The wind just told me that you don't believe what I'm telling you, she said and laughed. The wind is right, I said dryly. The girls that you've seen over the years are the Nahuals. They were his apprentices. Now that the Nahual is gone, they are the Nahual himself. But they are also my girls, mine. You mean that you're not Pablito's mother and they are really your daughters? I mean that they are mine. The Nahual gave them to me for safekeeping. You are always wrong because you rely on words to explain everything. Since I am Pablito's mother and you heard that they were my girls, you figured out that they must be brother and sisters. The girls are my true babies. Pablito, although he's the child that came out of my womb, is my mortal enemy. My reaction to her statements was a mixture of revulsion and anger. I thought that she was not only an aberrated woman, but a dangerous one. Somehow, part of me had known that since the moment I had arrived. She watched me for a long time. To avoid looking at her, I sat down on the bedspread again. The Nahual warned me about your weirdness, she said suddenly. But I couldn't understand what he meant. Now I know. He told me to be careful and not to anger you because you're violent. I'm sorry I was not as careful as I should have been. He also said that as long as you can write, you could go to hell itself and not even feel it. I haven't bothered you about that. Then he told me that you're suspicious because words entangle you. I haven't bothered you there either. I've been talking my head off, trying not to entangle you. There was a silent accusation in her tone. I felt somehow embarrassed at being annoyed with her. What you're telling me is very hard to believe, I said. Either you or Don Juan has lied to me terribly. Neither of us has lied. You understand only what you want to. The Nahual said that that is a condition of your emptiness. The girls are the Nahual's children, just like you and Eligio are his children. He made 6 children, 4 women and 2 men. Gennaro made 3 men. There are 9 altogether. One of them, Eligio, already made it. So now it is up to the 8 of you to try. Where did Eligio go? He went to join the Nahual and Gennaro. And where did the Nahual and Gennaro go? You know where they went. You're just kidding me, aren't you? But that's the point, Dona Soledad. I'm not kidding you. Then I will tell you. I can't deny you anything. The Nahual and Gennaro went back to the same place they came from, to the other world. When their time was up, they simply stepped out into the darkness out there. And since they did not want to come back, the darkness of the night swallowed them up.